Hello, and welcome to Art with Miss Michelle. Today we're going to learn about an artist named Andrea Moore. Andrea Moore is a very talented artist who does many different types of art, including oil painting, printmaking, needlepoint, which is a type of sewing, and she also does sculpture combined with her paintings. And she combines geometric shapes with nature to make some really interesting paintings. So Andrea Moore lives in actually two places. She lives in Massachusetts part of the time and also London part of the time. And something really interesting about Andrea is that she is actually Miss Mary's sister. So I am gonna actually show you a part of a video that she made recently for a virtual art show in Massachusetts during the pandemic, since artists can't have people come into their studios and art galleries right now to look at their work. She made a really cool video that shows her studio, and you can see part of her process and how she makes her pictures. So I will leave it to her.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, this is actually where I'm sitting at the moment. So this is my upstairs studio that stays fairly tidy, actually. And this is farther down from where I'm sitting. So I do oil paintings and have been working quite a lot gardening, and the gardening has kind of taken over my work. My work used to be abstract. Up on the cart you see there is a wood block I'm cutting for printmaking. There I tidied it up a little, and I brought plants in from outside. The plants are very happy outside, and they come in now this time of year a lot bigger than they were when they went out. This is in the basement, for the woodworking that I do. So this is the kind of work I do with wood. These panels are 6 feet tall. Each panel is 1 foot wide, and it's all these triangular shapes that I cut on the chop saw. And then this work was all in an exhibit I had at Highfield in 2017. So you can see the 3-dimensional component and the influence of my gardening. The one with the daisies and the peonies, a whole bunch of that is popping off the surface, so it's pieces of wood. This is my print in the show. It's called Acanthus Garden. And it was a series, it was from a series of prints using these stencils that I cut from quilter's plastic that comes from Joanne Fabrics. And I have to say, in printmaking, once you get the ink out and you've made a big mess with ink, you want to make quite a few prints. You don't want to just plan to make one. And the first print is often definitely not the best. So this one was, once I had done a few prints along the lines of my initial thought. For this one, I was playing with my stencils and just throwing out the window the idea of making it super realistic. So you can see the green and dark blue shapes are the acanthus flower, and you can see some white cosmos. And then the red are stencils I used from another print, from other prints that I just added in for fun. This is a tray in my laundry room. The paper has to be damp to go to be printed. So I soak it in water. So then in the foreground, you see the press. This is my basement studio. Not super excited about being in there in the summer. This is a good studio at night. So I often find myself printing late into the night because, again, once the ink is out, it's nice to just keep going with it because there's lots of cleanup. The press has this great wheel on it, so it's not a, there's no motor. The wheel is what turns the press bed going under the roller. And then this is the bench that I use with a glass palette for the inks. So you can just imagine the colors of ink on it and the sprayers and the palette knives and so on. This is the acanthus flower that's in our garden in England. So at the start of this series, this was the first print that I made, and it was using a technique called trace monotype. Trace monotype, it doesn't use the press. It's the idea of rolling ink onto a plate, turning the paper upside down onto the plate, onto the ink, and drawing on the back, and the drawing will pick up the ink. It's really a little crazy and a little bit daredevil in this case. So you see the plastic stencil on the left. I used that to block out the area of the flower, and I printed the background on the press. And then on the left, I rolled the color onto a plexiglass plate, and that paper I flipped over, so it's making the carbon paper effect. This is another iteration. This one was not trace monotype. This was completely made with the plastic stencils. This is a photograph of our acanthus plant. And then I made some watercolor paintings of the leaves. So when I'm not doing oil paintings or the printmaking, I can be in my living room doing my needlework. So I made a little display for myself in my living room. And this painting behind it is by my dad, who painted the Mississippi River and the skyline of Memphis, Tennessee, where we lived for half of my childhood. And then this is one of those needlework pieces where I painted the lavender plant in the winter, and then I stitched the design. So I use the watercolor for reference as I'm stitching. This is the bird's nest fern, one of my house plants, and then I put, it was, as if I cut the leaf off and put lichen behind it. And then I made a bunch of these into small sculptures where they're glued on to stone. This is actually a roof tile from the Cotswold limestone. This was a photograph sent by a friend who grew these violas, sent me the photograph, and I made a watercolor and then the stitching. And then just to end, I wanted to show this wonderful collection of heart-shaped rocks, which were given to me by a friend. And I made this photograph just thinking about people who are affected by the pandemic. So that's the end of my presentation.